Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammang sangham namasami. Dear friends, today I had called for a discussion of the Rāhula Sutta, the longer discourse to Rāhula, together with some comparisons with the counterpart to this, which is given in the Chinese Agamas, a later text. I think the best way to go will be to go straight into the sutta and let both the story and the Dhamma teaching unfold as it's given in the Majjhima 62, the version in our text, in the Pali text. And then we may then circle back to compare and generalize a little bit about it. This is a very interesting sutta in terms of the story that can be inferred from this teaching. Okay, here we go. Oops. Wrong sutta. There's a reason why this one is there, but it's not the one we're looking at. Here's the longer discourse of advice to Rāhula. So I have heard, at one time the Buddha was staying near Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's monastery. Then the Buddha robed up in the morning, and taking his bowl and robe, entered Savatthi for alms, and Venerable Rāhula also robed up and followed behind the Buddha. According to the commentary, the Buddha's son, Rāhula, would have been 18 years old at the time, and he would have been just ordained. To ordain, you were supposed to be 19 years old from the time of conception. So depending on how long he was in the womb, he could have just been ordained as a bhikkhu. It's said that Rāhula was amazed by the beauty of his father, the Buddha, the bearing, the charisma, the golden skin, all of the perfect features that the Buddha had, and that he had the thought that he too was going to have these same physical features, and feeling a lot of delight or pride about that. Apparently the Buddha was able to encompass Rāhula's mind and to know the thoughts because he looked back at Rāhula and gave this teaching. Rāhula, you should truly see any kind of form at all, past, future, or present, internal or external, coarse or fine, inferior or superior, far or near, all form with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this. This is not myself. Can anybody remember another famous sutta that has a very similar sentence in it? We read it here at the monastery yesterday morning. No, this morning. Yes, there you go. It's the Anatalakkhana Sutta. So the sutta on the three characteristics of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and non-self in all phenomena. But it has this series, past, future, present, internal, external, course of fine, to be regarded, all to be regarded as not mine. I am not this is not myself. And the Buddha would have emphasized form because this is the point that Rāhula's mind had become stuck on, was on the beauty of the form. And the teaching of getting rid of the conceit, I am, the conceit of identification and ownership, is closely connected to delighting and relishing in pleasant things. So when one delights and relishes, then it's a chance for that craving and identification to take hold and to grow and find a footing. Rāhula at the end of the sutta is going to be designated as a monk who is foremost in being trainable, or being one who's willing to receive the training. And just in this next sentence, he begins to show what a good student he is by replying, "Only form, Blessed One, only form, Holy One." And then the Buddha says form, Rāhula, as well as feeling and perception and choices and consciousness. So he's giving the form here in the context of the five aggregates of clinging. The physical body, and then four other aspects of mentality that are in a close synergy with the physical body, and which can be all together or one by one. Any one part of it or several parts of it or the whole complex of the five aggregates together can be what an unwise person would identify as being the self. And which one would have a tendency to cling to and react to. Just this morning, those of you who were here for the morning guided meditation, we were talking about using the five aggregates as a way to methodically look within and scan to see what's going on with us psychologically. So it may not be that easy to see the mind, but starting with the body and going from the body to the sense contacts, to the feelings, to the perceptions and thoughts, and then to consciousness itself, is a way to learn how to see what's going on within us, to understand the operation of the mind. In a certain way, we know that the Buddha prescribes yoniso manasikara, which is the mindfully mindful awareness, which is done looking below the surface down to the roots, are sometimes described as methodical mindfulness. So mindfulness which is not just sort of randomly aware of whatever comes up, but which is methodically directing awareness. And so by advising Rāhula about this contemplation, or this inquiry, we could say, regarding form, feeling, perceptions, choices, or this will be mental fabrications, and consciousness. And looking at them how? Looking at them in terms of right understanding. This is not mine, I'm not this is not myself. So this is a course of Yoniso Manasikara. Then Rāhula thought, who would go to the village for alms today after being advised directly by the Buddha? Turning back, he sat down cross-legged at the root of a certain tree, setting his body straight and establishing mindfulness in front, or putting mindfulness foremost, or Bhante Sujata saying, establishing mindfulness in his presence, or according to the traditional commentary, being mindful around the face or the nose. So Venerable Sariputta saw him standing there and addressed him, Rāhula, develop mindfulness of breathing. When mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated, it's very fruitful and beneficial. So if you're in a community that has more than one monk who is qualified to be teaching, this may happen to you, that you got one piece of advice from your primary teacher, and then the assistant teacher comes along and gives a different piece of advice, right? So what to do about that? This is a case where in the other version, they seem to find this to be not okay, and they sort of, it's sort of smoothed out in the other, and the version in the Ekotarika Agama parallel. In that sutta, rather than contemplating the not-self nature of the form, he advises contemplating the impermanent nature of form, extended to the other four aggregates. And then this one says that the Buddha gave a different set of instructions at this point, not the mindfulness of the breath, because that comes later at the end in the other version, contemplation and asubha and the Brahmaviharas. So it's given in a slightly different format, and all of the teaching in the Agama version is given by the Buddha, and you don't have one teaching from the Buddha and one version from Rāhula. I find the version with Sariputta giving an advice to be sort of credible, because when Ananda had sat down and established Paramukkham Satim Upata Petva, he had established his mindfulness in front. So Rāhula had sat down and started breath meditation, you see? And so maybe Rāhula noticed that and then affirmed that practice as being fruitful and beneficial. In any case, later in the afternoon, the Buddha had returned from his alms round, and Rāhula came out of his meditation, went to the Buddha, bowed, and sat to one side. And then he asked, "Sir, how is mindfulness of breathing, when developed and cultivated, to be very fruitful and beneficial?" Now, in this version, the Buddha does not immediately answer that question. Instead, he gives a sequence of other teachings, which I take to mean that Rāhula needs to do some preliminary work before the mind is soft and bright and pliable and ready to get the greatest benefit from the breath meditation. So that's my idea about that. And I see here that the Buddha is now returning to this element of form. That was this point that he made in the morning, was to contemplate form as not me, not mine, not myself, right? And so now he gives a meditation on form in terms of elements. He says, "Rāhula, the interior earth element is said to be anything hard, solid, and appropriated. Upadina, that would mean something that has been grasped or something that has been taken up in the sense that it's been taken up and being made part of one's identity. Anything hard, solid, and appropriated that's internal, pertaining to an individual. This includes head hair, body hair, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, bone marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, intestines, mesentery, undigested food, feces, or anything else hard, solid, and appropriated or taken up that's internal, pertaining to an individual. That's the internal earth element." So you may see that this is a sort of a different levels of hardness and softness, like the teeth, is very hard, and the feces are not that hard, they're kind of soft. I'm squeezing this is sort of like some parts, like the muscle can be, maybe your muscles might be rock solid, but mine are sort of soft like that. So the different levels of hardness and softness is part of the earth element, and is to be contemplated again as being not me, not mine. This is the interior earth element. Interior and exterior are just earth element. This should be seen with right understanding. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. So he's really, really pressing on this self-conceit. So this, I think, must have been Rāhula's problem. And the teacher is trying this way and that way and this way and that way to knock it out of him, to get him the way to finally emerge from this self-conceit. When you truly see with right understanding, you reject the earth element, detaching the mind from the earth element. And what Sujato translates as rejecting is the Pali word nibbindati, which is sometimes translated as disenchantment. And In the olden days, they used to translate it as revulsion, but they thought that for modern Western people, it was too harsh to tell them to develop revulsion towards their own body, because Western people are already much too neurotic and have too many mental issues in relationship to the body, and so they are not trying to encourage somebody who might feel negative about the imperfections of their body to be even more repulsive towards it. So instead, the modern teachers began using disenchantment. So instead of to be enchanted with something, is to be very deluded and tricked and fooled into think, that you're going to be able to gain happiness if you could just make your body to be perfect and keep it perfect. Or if you could find another person with a really perfect body, and if that person likes you, then that would make you happy, or something like that. So that's being enchanted with the body, and otherwise to be disenchanted. But this disenchantment, it's like you tried to find happiness there, but you discovered that you can't find happiness there. It's not your refuge. It's not reliable. The nourishment for true happiness is not to be found there. And then, just like a dog who's been chewing on a bone for a long time until all the meat is completely gone and all the marrow has been sucked out and the bone has got not even any smell or anything left that seems like nutriment, and the dog may just drop it and walk away. Then similar with each of the elements, the water element, anything that's watery and appropriated or taken up, that's internal to an individual, including bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, synovial fluid, urine, and anything else that's watery and appropriated, that's internal, pertaining to an individual. I need a drink of water. When we have access to pure water, and the body needs water, it's so satisfying. It's like it's life itself to be able to get a drink of pure water when that's what the body needs in order to live. So in this way, this process of taking up the physical body is just like taking up the very essence of life itself. How opposite it is to think of it in terms of pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, saliva, snot, and so on. But that's what it becomes. So when this is the interior water element, interior and exterior water elements are just the water element. Should be truly seen with right understanding, just like this. This is not mine, I am not this is not myself. When you truly see with right understanding, you reject the water element, detaching the mind from the water element. Perhaps Rāhula is starting to see that his idealized fantasy of being a beautiful, gorgeous, and adorable man like his father through the physical beauty is completely besides the point. Then likewise the fire element, within the body, what is called fire, fury, and appropriated or taken up, that's internal, is defined as that which warms and that which ages, that which heats you up when feverish, and that which properly digests food and drink or anything else that's fire, fury, and appropriated that's internal, pertaining to an individual. So it's the composting oven, which is inside the body. And then just the same, interior, external, the same, not me, not mine, not myself, become detached from the fire element. And the air element, defined, anything that's airy, and appropriated or taken up or grasped. And that includes the wind internally. So wind is energy. So it's the very vibrations of the living body, the beating of the heart, the pulsing of the electrical impulses in the nervous system, the flowing of the blood, and the little elements, the little structures in the body that are always, kind of like this, doing their work inside of the body. And then in particular, the wind in terms of gassy things like the wind in the belly or the bowels, the winds that flow through the limbs, in-breaths, out-breaths, anything else that's airy, internal, pertaining to an individual, internal, external, the same. Not me, not mine, not myself. Then the space element. Again, you can, in a certain kind of way, first picture how the space element has the pleasure and delight in terms of the wide open spaces. Today is a clear day. I think if Chintana points her camera up, you'll see the empty sky above you. See, that's the space element. So much space. And if you have a large house that's kind of clean, and you look around all the space inside the room where you are in the house and see how spacious the house is, if the room is spacious compared with its whatever's filling it up. But then also he's giving these kind of gross and unattractive aspects like the ear canal, the nostrils, the mouth, the space for swallowing what's eaten and drunk, the space where the undigested food stays, and then the space where it gets excreted from the nether regions of the body. All of those cavities are the interior space element. And we become disenchanted with that. So now the Buddha takes it a step further. He gives this teaching, Rāhula, meditate like earth. When you meditate like the earth, pleasant and unpleasant contacts will not occupy your mind. Suppose you were to toss both clean and unclean things on the earth, like feces, urine, spit, pus, blood. The earth isn't horrified, repelled, and disgusted of this, because of this. And the same way, meditate like the earth. Then the pleasant and unpleasant contacts will not occupy your mind. So then this is how a person can be agitated because of liking and disliking, and because of the proliferation of thoughts and intentions that arise based on being caught up with liking or wanting pleasant things, disliking and hating unpleasant things. Meditating like water. You can wash both clean and unclean things in water, like feces, urine, spit, pus, and blood. The water isn't horrified, repelled, and disgusted because of this. Meditate like water, so that these contexts do not occupy the mind. So what is this occupy the mind? Before there was the upadana, that was this taking up. So then when you take it up and it occupies the mind, then it becomes like a repetition compulsion or a mental habit that one would be thinking the same thoughts again and again. The Pali word is tasanti, which is related to being established. So these contexts don't get established in the mind. Likewise, meditate like fire. Fire is able to burn all kinds of things. Clean things and dirty things can be burned by the fire. And the fire is not horrified, repelled, and disgusted because of this. Likewise with the wind, if you try to, if the wind is blowing on a rose garden or the wind is blowing on a cesspit, the wind doesn't care whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. The wind just blows according to the force of nature. And then like space, so that pleasant and unpleasant contacts do not occupy your mind. I had one of the most, I would say one of the three most significant spiritual awakenings in my lifetime that's sort of related to this. It was an occasion when I had been hiking for a long time on the Appalachian Trail and was hiking in Maine by myself in a very beautiful part of the forest that was very damp. The ground was very damp and boggy, and it was cold and with a very fine drizzling fog. And in this constant humidity, the mosses and lichens that grew on the boulders in the forest were about 5 inches thick, and much deeper and softer than any moss that we see down in the lower parts of the United States. So I sat down to have a rest there, and the thing that occurred to me was that the life there in that forest was perfectly settled in a context, and that I was the stranger there. So sitting on a wet, spongy moss was like not actually a comfortable place for me to be sitting or lying down for a long time, because it was wet and cold, and the air was wet and cold, and so in that way I was like, I didn't really belong there, but the moss and the trees and the lichens and the birds and the insects that were there all were perfectly adapted to be there in that space, and especially the plant life. In retrospect, it seems to me that there's a way that the consciousness that human beings have with having these sense organs that are contacting with phenomenon, and the feelings arising from that, the perceptions arising from that, the thoughts and intentions arising from that, that all of that mentality is such a burden, such a distraction, such something that's like very destabilized, and is never able to be like fully at peace and just fully contented and one with nature just the way it is. So that it's like the insight that I was having there was that how bhava, how becoming, how this existence as sentient human beings is a kind of a torture. And that there's a possibility in nature that there is some other kind of a possibility of a way of existing that doesn't have that tendency for alienation like that. So I'm going to pause here. So this was the teaching that the Buddha gave, especially related to form and to eliminate self-conceit relating to form. And I'd like to see if there are any comments or questions about the sutta so far. Okay, Flo.
Thank you. This is mostly just a translation question. I noticed earlier one of the kandas I usually see translated as mental fabrication was translated as choices. And I'm wondering if you could talk more about that. Because some mental fabrications seem like a choice to me, but like others don't. And I'm wondering why it was translated that way.
Right. Sankhara is the Pali word, and in different contexts it has a different meaning. In the context of the widest context, it's simply related to causation. So something which is caused by a previous cause, which is the result of a previous cause, is a sankhara, and something which is a cause that creates a subsequent result is called a sankhara. There's a particular kind of sankhara which is related to karma and rebirth. So anything that's the result from a previous karma is called a sankhara, and anything that you do which is creating karma that's going to bear fruit for you in the future is called a sankhara. So that's a particular specific kind of causation. And in terms of karma, the most the key feature of a karma is it's what you do intentionally. And so when Bhante Sujata's translate as choices, he's pointing to that which we do intentionally, which is creating karma that's resulting in a subsequent fruition, either in a subsequent rebirth or else in the subsequent things that we experience. When Bhante Thanissaro translate as fabrications, he's sort of pointing to a different kind of like an aspect of sankhara, which is that through perceptions and thoughts that the mind creates a universe. So the world that each individual lives in is mind-made in the sense that many different conditions determine how we see the world or how we perceive it, what we think of it. So even living in the same city, one person could be living in a hellish world, and another person could be living in a kind of sort of a heavenly type world, and it's depending on the specific circumstances of their lives and how they think that determines what kind of a world they see. So in that case, he's pointing out that we fabricate our reality, and then whichever reality we fabricated, then we have to go live there. So Ajahn Brahm famously says, if somebody is destined for hell because of their bad behavior, they may be reborn in hell, and they may stay there as long as they think they deserve to stay there. So the hell realm is really created by the mind. In a way, it's easier to use Pali because then
Yeah.
it's one can have a chance to at least know which of the Buddha's terms is being spoken about.
Mhm.
I'll call on Susan.
Thank you, Ayya. This talk really helped me clarify a question I've had for a long time, and it is, I think, revulsion and detachment are disenchantment. I get that, and I gratefully have a lot of that. But I was always wondering, is there aversion in here? And so this really differentiates it for me very well. And the second part, I was missing that second piece. It really explains there's no aversion in this this practice. So thank you. And like I see, maybe like a lot of older people, they can easily get disenchanted. I think it might come naturally as people age, and maybe even revulsion. But if it's with anger and aversion, it's not what he's talking about.
Thank you. That's exactly true. That's what we were trying to say, and I'm going to pick up on your comment when we get to the next section about loving kindness, because it's not aversion, and if we've taken a hold of it as aversion, then we're taking a wrong turn in our practice. Okay. I'm going to call on Ren.
Thank you, Ayya. I have a question for a long time, on and off here and there, and I forgot about it, but I never really had any clarity on this, which was brought up when you shared your story with being in nature and taking a rest in a forest where everything seems to be at peace, all the creatures and plant life, and and you yourself felt like a foreign object in there. So I guess my question is, it seems like smaller, so-called lower life form seems to know its place more than humans, because we're the one who brought on our torture. So why does human being or human form having a higher place in reincarnation, like what do you call the wheel, than animals? What is it special about that? And I also thought, this is kind of even a sillier thought, I wonder if Buddha wasn't in human form, teaching us, the Dhamma through, human context. I wonder, like I don't even know how to say it. Like, would the context be different? I mean, if we're lower animals somehow in that context, and I don't think I can make this question very well, but the first part of my question is clear to me. Why us being tortured and not part of nature, it seems to enjoy a higher place than animals?
Well, I don't really think that the moss has obtained nibbana just because it's not experiencing alienation in this way that I was at that moment. So it's more of a metaphor than what I would actually believe is the nature of moss, or the nature of animals and insects. So having the capacity for sentience and detachment at the same time. That's what really the Buddha is praising and saying what we have the unique opportunity and chance to aspire to is to be fully equipped with our capacities for knowing and wisdom, and also to be fully detached from any type of clinging or any type of taking up of identity. So at that point, one would obtain nirvana, and one would be completely at home in the universe, as much at home as I was imagining that moss was at home in the forest. I think the Arhat is also completely at home wherever they are. As to the animals, well, the Bodhisattva was an animal in many previous lifetimes, and he taught or manifested Dhammas in relationship to the state that he was in. So one can read the Jataka stories and sort of appreciate that, even animals, any being who's sentient, does have some capacity that's onward leading, because all beings have the desire for happiness and the desire for release from suffering.
That certainly put the human beings in a very special position among other animals. It's really putting us in a very special position, because only the sentient ones can be enlightened. It just feels so, I don't know, so focused on being human as a way
There
out.
are devas, there are heavenly beings who are non-returners, who are also able to hear the Dhamma and to move on to full awakening. So then there's a great amount of intelligence in the non-human world and the deva spheres, in the different divine spheres above us. I know there's that statement that heaven is so pleasant that they won't be motivated, but there are a lot of devas who are quite interested in awakening, who were curious, who wanted to know. That's why they talk to the Buddha. If the Buddha met Sakka, and they had a discussion about religion, and the Buddha said, well, have you met any other religious teachers or philosophers, and what did they tell you? And Sakka said, well, as soon as I saw them, they just ran back to the village saying, I saw Sakka, I saw Sakka. And they didn't stop long enough to have a conversation. But so there is intelligence in the world, and I don't, since we're humans, we're able to understand what can be done with this human form. So I guess I can leave it at that. I'm going to call on Chintana.
All right. I just wanted to express how much I can relate to what you're saying. And I spent my whole life trying to be appealing mostly to him, whoever him was. And now I'm not trying to do that anymore. And I'm 62, and I am perfectly okay with my body that is becoming, for lack of a better word, decrepit. And I'm just so pleased that I don't feel a need to decorate or suck in or try to do something to make myself look better for someone else, because now I'm just okay with being me. And I'm so grateful for that insight. I'm so grateful for the teaching today because, like, I think it was Ren, or it might have been Susan, I can't remember now. It said they were a little bit confused. Is it revulsion? I think that was Susan. Is it revulsion? I've always been confused on that too, because we can't have revulsion. That's bad, you know? So that was a great clarifying point. I just want to say thank you.
Okay. Let's go back to the sutta now. Now, this next set of teachings that the Buddha gave partly segues into this very question about aversion or ill will, that ill will also has to be eliminated so that delight and relishing of the body or of anything else which is taken up or which is clung to has to be put aside and let go, but not with aversion. The Buddha said, meditate on love. I don't agree with that translation. I would say loving kindness, metta. When you meditate on loving kindness, any ill will be given up. So loving kindness is the cure for aversion or for ill will. Ill will is similar to aversion. It's more like settled. It becomes, instead of just something that could flash up in a moment, ill will is a bit more, becomes more habitual. Then he said, meditate on compassion. When you meditate on compassion, any cruelty will be given up. What is cruelty? Cruelty is the intention to harm, the intention to hurt anyone at all. Or you could say there's a kind of a negligent cruelty where you're willing to harm another being, but you don't really care whether you harm them. And so if they're inconvenient for you, you'll just squish them, step on them, and without any concern for their feeling or their experience. So that would be cruelty. And cruelty can also, cruelty and ill will can be also external or internal. So one could have self-hatred, which is a terrible, terrible problem and a terrible obstacle to making progress with meditation or progress on the spiritual path. So if one is suffering from self-hatred, then it's really necessary to do whatever kind of a reflection or inner work that's necessary to overcome that, whatever it takes. And at the same way, one can be cruel internally to one's own self. If you think that you deserve to be punished and you punish yourself, or if you are in the throes of some kind of addiction and you are using toxic substances or toxic process of any kind to hide or to get away from your anxiety or get away from your unpleasant life, And so you use those things to run away, and then later on that you have side effects which are very dangerous and harmful to you. But you ignore the dangers and consume things or do things which are subsequently creating a danger to yourself. That's a kind of a self-cruelty, isn't it? So one would be so, just considerate towards oneself as well as being considerate towards others. So if you said, like if you had some beloved relative who maybe was not that strong, who was, vulnerable, that they could be, bullied or mistreated. But if you love and appreciate them so much, and then you would be like looking out for them, making sure that they're comfortable, making sure that they get what they need. And then especially then if you have more than two people in the family, the other family members are looking and they can see you, what you're doing, and you want to be especially sure that those acts of compassion and protection for other beings is establishing something that affects yourself and everybody around you. Then this next one is very interesting. Meditate on rejoicing. Rejoicing in the Pali is called mudita. Mudita is finding happiness in the success of others. When you meditate on mudita, on rejoicing, sometimes it's called sympathetic joy, then it says here that discontent will be given up. This is not exactly obvious on the face of it. Discontent in the Pali is arati. Rati means to delight in something. And arati is the opposite, that you don't delight. This could happen perhaps a person who's suffering from depression or something like that, it could be Christmas or something, or your team just won the game and everybody around you is all happy and you're just kind of, so what, like that. It's kind of arati is also called boredom. I associate it with a kind of like a critical mind. So then, if in the case of other people's success, you don't appreciate their success, but instead you feel like criticizing them. But the practice here, I think, is if one is suffering from that, arati also is associated with the hindrance of sloth and torpor. So if one is feeling dull, tired, lazy, this is why it seems very much connected to depression. So if you're feeling depressed, and if you're able to use meditation practice to help you to lift yourself out of depression, then it seems like it's saying here, if you think of the inspiring and admired hero in your life who's got so many great qualities that has so many uplifting qualities, and just reflect on the goodness in the people around you, that could, combined with the other aspects that we know about in working with depression, it could help to lift oneself out of that mood and come back to balance. In the Agama, it gave a different factor. It said that meditating on mudita, rejoicing or sympathetic joy, means that envy will be given up. So envy is that judgmental comparing mind that thinks that if somebody else is successful, then they're higher and I'm lower. And as a result of that comparison, then instead of just congratulating them on their good luck or their success, instead, in a jealous way, you want to get what they have and you feel dissatisfied with your own personal situation. And then the last one here is equanimity. And here, when you meditate on equanimity, any repulsion would be given up. The word for repulsion in Pali is patika. And that's very similar to like a disgust. Like if you were taking some food or some medicine and it smells and tastes rotten, and you got that gag reflex, that's a patika. Or if you are, if your hearing is if you're sensitive to loud noises, and somebody, makes a loud banging noise, or you hear a shot or something like that, and there's that instant reaction. That's patika. So that kind of reactivity then is solved with the meditation on equanimity. And so here, coming back to the original problem with becoming disenchanted with the body, seeing the asubha practice where you see the elements of the body that are kind of foul and disgusting, like pus and blood and urine and feces and so forth. So you then, you need to not take up dislike of the body, not take up anger towards the body or anything else, not take up discontent with the body or depression related to the body, and not take up repulsion about the body because of the body being the way it is. So then these practices are kind of like the counter medicine that will protect against the asubha meditation or the meditation on the elements, the practice of becoming nibbida, becoming disenchanted, that those, you don't fall too far. So it's a correcting and balancing practice. So then, depending on what your state of mind is, you can know what you need to overcome. And then the last one in this set is Latu on this set. And again, like, so this is like balancing in the opposite way. Meditating on ugliness, or you could say non-infatuation. In a few minutes, Richard will tell me his translation of asubha, which I like very much, but I can't remember how he translates it. But this is to see the body just as it is in a balanced way. So looking at the things that are difficult to look at in a way to eliminate any hateful or aversive reactivity towards those things. But also that this undermines lust and craving and delight and becoming infatuated. And, even after we have, when somebody is young and foolish, they could think that beauty is going to bring them to liberation. And they could live an entire life dedicated to beauty until they find out that actually beauty doesn't lead to liberation by itself. But if you want to speed the process up and not spend 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, or 60 years being infatuated with beauty, then you can intentionally do this other meditation on the Asubha practice in order to overcome lust. And then, now the very last in this set is the meditating on impermanence or anicca, which is said to overcome the conceit, I am. So whatever identity there is, when you see how fast it's changing, how you see all the components of whatever you think you are, how fast all the components are changing, then that this powerful meditation on impermanence is a way to absolutely defeat the conceit I am, or the conceit about the self. Now I want to pause here for comments. Okay, Chintana.
I have some background noise now, but when you say to meditate on what you were saying, that's equanimity. So is that what you're saying? Equanimity is when we meditate on our insides?
Yes, equanimity can be a theme of meditation. In particular, if a person obtains samadhi or concentration, then at first they may experience very elevated blissful feelings because of seclusion and because of the unification of the mind can be very blissful. But then that blissful feeling becomes sort of tedious, and the mind lets go of that and lets go of that and becomes more and more and more calm.
Okay, so whatever we do just to come back to the middle. Okay.
Yes. Even, like during the day, we notice the highs and the lows very strongly. If you had an extreme high or an extreme low, it may be quite memorable, the only thing you remember from the whole day. But if you accurately assessed each moment passing by, you would see that 80% of the moments that you have are much more equanimous. But we don't notice the equanimous moments because they don't stand out that much. So practicing constant mindfulness also helps to create, like there's a space of equanimity in between the peaks and valleys. And that space is where we find freedom. So that then when we do have an extreme experience, a high or a low, we know that it's surrounded with equanimity. And one can direct the mind towards that. Even something as simple like, I have like a knee pain and hip pain, and if the pain is particularly noticeable during meditation, my hands are not painful at the moment, so I may intentionally direct attention towards focusing on the hands for a while, which is more neutral. So there are a lot of different ways of getting to equanimity, simple ones and sublime ones. Yeah.
Thank you, Sadi.
Call on Christine.
Hello, hi, I'm Christine. I had a question. When you're talking about meditating on equanimity, is it like when you're saying, for example, or you may have uncomfortable sensations or pleasant sensations, you just don't focus on pleasant and unpleasant. You're basically just like watching it, or like not giving too much effort on it, in the sense, like realizing that it's impermanent this moment. Like you're saying, 80% of the day is actually you're more equanimous, but we're so focused on the external and the highs and the lows. But when you're saying on those highs and lows moments, do you still remind yourself to like not react, in a sense? Like, you know, some people are more reactive than others, like to like still practice in that sense of like following your breath, and like even though you feel your breath maybe going faster, or you're feeling like vibrations from other people that may be unpleasant, you just, even though you're just aware of it, and do you just stay calm in those moments? And then so you kind of learn and train your body to be more aware of those highs and lows, and it gives you aware of being more present. Is that what you're saying?
That's a really great question, and I appreciate that you asked. People can sort of, there are two things. One is a neutral feeling. So 80% of the time, the feeling tone of what's happening is kind of neutral. But then equanimity is much more important than that. Equanimity is the ability of the mind not to become reactive regardless of what's happening. So when you are truly equanimous, then a group of criminals can saw your arms and legs off with a hacksaw, and you will still have an equanimous mind, because you have developed so much wisdom that you will just know this body is impermanent, so at least I'm not getting angry.
Well, what about in a situation if someone's getting harmed, and like you're aware of it's not right, and of course you want to help that person out of compassion and kindness, and saying their arms are being sawed off, and they're in pain and they're suffering, or someone's really getting it, like an animal's being harmed, or for example,
Right.
then even though can you still be economist and still act on it and save that person and help them? Or you let it, I mean, not saying you let it, but like, what's the difference between that then? How do you
So-
stay in that balanced mind, knowing that the right, effort to help someone?
Right.
How does that work then?
So, well, when the criminals are cutting off your arms and legs, you are being harmed in the sense that your life is being harmed.
Right.
And for one's own self, it's like almost easier to develop like a wisdom. I can be more wise about myself. And if I'm really successful, I can keep my mind equanimous under any kind of duress. Even if people are hateful on me or trying to harm me, nevertheless, I can keep my own mind calm and centered and equanimous. Then when it comes to another being who's being harmed, because that being or that person doesn't yet have that much wisdom. And so when they're subjected to the stress of the duress or the hate, it could create like a reactions in them, that they could be pulled into hatred. They could be pulled into fear and terror. They could be, pulled into a state where if they died right then, they would be born in a lower realm for many eons, because they were so caught up in hatred and fear because of being harmed. So in that kind of way, you can see that there is a way in which we do want to help beings, but we should do it the way that a skilled physician would help the patient. So, I mean, the physician does have like empathy for the suffering of the patient, but they also have to be calm when they're diagnosing the disease and deciding the best course of action, or advising about what the choices are. If they're not calm, they're not really able to help.
Right. So then in that situation, what you're saying, so then to me, understand, so even though like someone is hurting me and cutting my arm, I'm still calm, but I have wisdom, and at the same time, like I'm calm, I like have like wisdom, like Panya, and I know how to help myself, like act in a way that is calm and non-reactive, like more like concentrated and focused, like maybe focusing on my breath and then try to get out of the situation, but do it in a way that's still balanced, that is not harming my mind to like think of the worst, like just still be as calm in a sense.
Uh, when your life is coming to an end, which could be not that far away, it's definitely wonderful to be aware of your karma to keep the mind away from hatred and
Okay.
aversion. So,
Okay.
because the moral quality of your thoughts and your state of mind is really, really the most important thing. It's much more important than if
In the
they took away
physical.
your money or if they took your car or they, whatever they take, but they can't take your dignity or they can't
Mm.
take your moral purity. But then, while we're still a student, we might know that we're not yet like that much developed in this Dhamma.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm putting myself into a circumstance external that's like too much stressful, and my practice is falling apart, and my practice is going downhill because of stress, then I may choose to remove myself to a more peaceful, easier situation where I'm able to practice and make progress. So then it is true that we may make choices that, to create as much safety as we need to be able to practice. So like years and years and years ago, I was in a job. They wanted me to do something that seemed dishonest to me. And, in one way I could try to grow where I'm planted and just stay in that job and try to withstand the pressure, but I quit the job because the job was just, I couldn't just find a way to grow in the Dharma and be in that job. So those kind of choices can be made by way of self-care, but nevertheless, I could still be very cultivating equanimity and cultivating and helping to do what supports the stability and the solidity of my spirit, not to be disturbed or upset or turned over by external things, even though I make a tactical withdrawal and I'm withdrawing from one external situation out of self-care. Okay, I'll call on Susan, and you will be the last comment.
Thank you, Aya. This may be a little going off, but it's kind of quick. It's related. It's I heard a group discussion on this topic of, how much to intervene when there's violence happening in front of us. And someone said her understanding with the Mahayana path was that because she had seen that people would say really, flippantly, oh, that's just their karma. This animal is suffering and that's just their karma, or this person. And this can be misused that way, where we might have these kind of views that are just turning our back on violence is not really what this is teaching either, so it takes a deeper reflection like we're doing. I think these, and I'm glad they shared that in that group, because they thought that was part of why Mahayana has this kind of view to help. But anyway, that was, I had not thought of it like that before, that's part of the way why they don't want to just turn their back on violence. But anyway, just throwing that out there. Thank you.
During these coming months of the Vasa, we're thinking to develop a series about practicing for peace. And this very question about what's the skillful way to be in a world where there is a lot of cruelty and violence is one of the themes that I hope we'll be able to develop later on. I'm going to go to just give you a mention of what's the last part of this Rāhula Sutta, and that is the teaching on breathing. And in this case, what's given is exactly the basic summary of the 16 steps of the Anapanasati Sutta, or the meditation on the breath that's focused on awareness and learning calming. So in each set, one learns how to observe the calming of the breath. One experiences powerful, positive feelings, the piti, or the rapture and deep meditation, and then practice with an inclination towards calmness and even stillness, so that the mental activity becomes stilled. And then in terms of the mind, we experience the gladness or the joyfulness of the mind, experience the mind immersed in samadhi or concentration, and then experiencing the mind become calmed and becoming freed from reactivity. And then in the last set, so this calmness then is sort of morphing over to liberation, our freedom. So in terms of the dhammas, or the truths, one is able to practice breathing and knowing impermanence, breathing in and knowing the fading away of that reactivity, breathing and observing the cessation of craving and all of the defilements, and then breathing and observing letting go of any kind of attachments, that upadi, or that taking up or that appropriation of anything as being part of the identity. All of that is completely let go. So then this complete peace and complete liberation, complete breaking of the bond of attachment is all accomplished within the Anapanasati. If you would like to spend another more time with the Anapanasati Sutta, we can do that. But now we've come to the end of our time, and I just welcome. The Anapanasati is such a great meditation, and for a lot of people, it becomes a very, like a powerful, learned practice, so that it's easy and possible to sit down anytime sitting down for meditation, and then the mind naturally goes towards that breath meditation. And breath meditation is one of the greatest, most universally beneficial meditation for every personality type. But then in this sutta, I want you to remember that the takeaway is that if you can see what's up with you, what state you're in, and notice if there are any shortcomings, either on the side of greed, on the side of aversion, or on the side of taking up certain states and becoming obsessed or beset, or having certain negative things lodged in the mind, that then one should think of taking up these other practices to dislodge the negative forces from the mind. If you don't believe it works, you won't have the motivation to do it. But if you thought that the Buddha is wise, that the Buddha is the skillful teacher, and that when he gave these instructions, he did it because he's trying to convince us that these instructions will work. They won't work just by knowing them theoretically, but they would work if one undertakes them and practices them with intention. And it could even take a long time, more than a few minutes or more than one sit or even more than 1 week before you finally could have a breakthrough of success if you've got some kind of chronic pattern in your life that you need to overcome. But finding the practice that's the most relevant to your chronic shortcoming and working on that with sincerity and faith and with effort, you may be able to get a good result. So that's my conclusion about this sutta today. We can close by giving respect to the Triple Gem. Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhamman Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangha Sangham Namami. Thank you for your practice and for your patient listening today.
Thank you, Ayya.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Ayya.
Thank you, Ayya.